What would stop Oregon from winning it all next year?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. I thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Today's recruit breakdown, Tony Cumberland, one of my favorite recruitments of all time. I'll explain why. And some thoughts on Dink Riggs. Has not been discussed much, if at all, really, on this show in the offseason. That changes today. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. So, I think the most obvious answer to what would stop Oregon from winning it all next year is facing Indiana. You got to throw that one out there, right? That's sizable hurdle to try to get over because I expect the Hoosiers to be good. But let's just look internally. Just looking at Oregon's team and the roster, I think the number one thing that would stop them was arguably the number one thing that stopped them from winning the national championship this past year. And there are two sides to this coin, because he was a huge part of getting them there. But Dante Moore's play against Indiana made it darn near impossible for Oregon to win that football game. He was also a big reason why Oregon was there, because of the season that he had. But in the playoff itself, he played well against James Madison, as he should. It's a vastly inferior opponent. And then against Texas Tech, again, the offense didn't play particularly well. He made a lot of mistakes. And then against Indiana, those mistakes turned into a lot of points, and Oregon's defense didn't have the same fastball it had against the Red Raiders. But I think beyond that, if you go beyond those two, which were the biggest hurdles from this past year, and you look at the rest of the team, there really aren't that many weaknesses on Oregon's roster. It's one of the reasons people like myself and others have uttered the phrase natty or bust going into next season. Because it's year 5 for Dan Lanning. It's year, I don't even know what at this point for Oregon fans, might depend on who you are, waiting for that first national championship. And the roster on paper is as good or the best that Dan Lanning has ever had. I will get to a series at some point comparing and contrasting 2024 and 2026, but these are the 2 years that I've looked at on paper and said, kind of feel like everything is there. This does lead me to an SSA. If you just look at the position groups, and for those of you that are new here, SSA is Spencer Scale of Agreement. You send me a take, 1 through 10, half numbers included. I tell you how much I agree and why. SSA, offensive line and linebacker play will stop Oregon from winning it all in 2026, questioning the depth. That's tricky. O-line and linebacker play. I'm going to put this at a 3. And I bet that's lower than most of you were anticipating. Now, the reason I have that as low as I do is that I can't think of a team that didn't win a national championship. Not that every position group doesn't matter. Of course they all matter. You don't want to go into a playoff environment against one of the best teams in college football, whoever that may be, and have a real, exploitable weakness, so to speak. Like against Ohio State. I had what turned out to be a fatefully accurate segment going into that game in the Rose Bowl where I said, I think Oregon safeties are the biggest concern. Ohio State attacked them the entire game, and we know how that one went. There were other problems too, but that was a big part of it. So I don't know that there's been a team that hasn't won a national championship because of linebacker play. I can say there are teams that haven't won it all because of offensive line play. I think that's the more valid of the concern between those two specific position groups. I'm just somebody that, even though they didn't land Jordan Seaton, the Colorado transfer and likely future first-round pick in the NFL draft, I still feel good about Oregon's offensive line. But part of this kind of horseshoes its way back to Dante Moore. Because if the offensive line is not as good as it needs to be, what is your answer to that if you are an offensive coordinator or if you're a football team in general? The answer is your quarterback has to play out of his mind. Great example. Even though they're different players, I don't know that he could put on this type of performance. But Trinidad Chambliss last year, who's getting another challenge to his eligibility, this is college football now, Trinidad Chambliss against Georgia basically willed his team to a win in the college football playoff quarterfinal game because Ole Miss's offensive line against Georgia's front was outmatched consistently, and it did not matter. They couldn't get stops. Chambliss had the answers. He made all of the throws. He ran his way out of sacks. He threw his way out of some sacks. And what we saw from Dante Moore this past year is, compared to some of the other more veteran quarterbacks in the playoff field, his processing and ability to dissect and break down some of the better defenses wasn't where it needed to be. Well, if Oregon puts themselves in the same position next year, which is, 2 wins away from being the national champion, there's a decent chance you're going to come up against a defense that has the same sorts of capabilities schematically. And so if your offensive line, if they're just completely overmatched, does Dante Moore have the mobility to put on the Superman cape and look like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes out there? No. He's mobile, but he's not a runner per se. He'd have to find those answers more with shifting protections or finding his hot routes or any other number of things that quarterbacks can do. But again, I feel good about Oregon's chances next year because the offensive line, you're replacing 3 starters from a year ago, and Emmanuel Pranon is, the more he tests at the combine and gets projected into the draft, he could be, I think, as early as a 2nd-round pick, maybe even a 1st-round pick. I don't know. That's going to be a significant loss. But I think people have talked a lot more about the 2 tackles, and you lose Alex Harkey and you lose Isaiah World. If you go watch what they did in the biggest games in pass protection, I don't think they were that elite. And so if Oregon's offensive line play from this last year, which was overall very good, is replicable next season, and I believe with the talent they have, it absolutely is, then that again brings me back to Dante Moore. Because it was Dante Moore who threw a pick 6 and Dante Moore who handed Indiana the ball at the 5-yard line. Like, those were the mistakes that in those games, they lose it for you. And the veteran quarterbacks didn't make those mistakes. So I like where Oregon's offensive line is at. It's certainly something to watch in spring. But I don't think linebacker play has ever been the reason a team doesn't win at all. And I'm interested to see how they replace Bryce Betcher. And I think Oregon's offensive line can be pretty close to what it was a year ago. Maybe even better in some respects. I think Fox Crater can be great. Not good. I think he can be great at left tackle. Right tackle, left guard, I think those are bigger question marks. But overall, I keep this at a 3. Even after flushing out my thoughts here in this segment, I say 3, that O-line and linebacker play will stop Oregon from winning it all. No, I think at some level, if everybody stays, relatively healthy, and I don't know, I'd love for him to fix the calendar and whatnot so that guys aren't transferring out during the playoff run, but I digress. I think at some point it's going to come down to Dante Moore and the coaching staff. I think those are the biggest questions for the Ducks going into next year. But if you disagree, hey, let me know in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. Continuing to roll through the 2026 class. What do we do with Tony Cumberland? Well, first, we appreciate his recruitment. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. It's a mouthful, but you'll love it. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits whatever you are feeling. Anything. Whatever you're feeling, it is all available there. So you can mix spreads, totals, player props to match how you see things playing out. Then you apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with whichever team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, with now more upside to it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is, a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Check them out at TurboTax.com/local. Not going to tell you what, but today's beverage for a second segment sip, excellent. Excellent. Needed a little extra. Not that there's anything in the drink. It's not spiked. That might have been how it sounded to some of you out there. I'm just recording this show later at night, and I just got something that tastes very, very good. Okay. If I needed a boost, I'd go to 5 Hour Energy, obviously. So, today's recruit breakdown is Tony Cumberland, and I want to appreciate his recruitment because when guys commit way out in a particular class, it can be hard to keep them committed for that long of a time. And that Cumberland seemingly never wavered. I don't know that there was ever a rumor, a message board post, or anything. He committed, class of 2026, with signing day in December of 2025. He committed to Oregon in September of 2023. I remember talking about him on the show. Time flies when you're having fun, because now here we are, and he's finally going to be a Duck. And we've known about him for about 2.5 years at this point. And there are other guys that flipped to Oregon on National Signing Day, like Anthony Jones, not Tank Jones, Anthony Jones. Didn't know about him for quite as long, so just wanted to appreciate that. But Tony Cumberland, 6'4.5", and he's every inch of that when you watch him on film. 285-pound defensive lineman from Willamette High School, but began his high school career in Arizona, and I think around the time he committed to Oregon, he decided he wanted to go up and play close to Eugene. 4-star recruit in the 2026 cycle. Number 60 player overall nationally. He'd kind of flirted, I think, with 5-star status in the 24/7 composite a couple times, but super highly rated guy, and with good reason regardless. Number 5 overall defensive lineman and number 1 player in the state of Oregon. No surprise there. There have been a handful of elite recruits to come out of the state of Oregon, but not many. And Cumberland, and I don't think very many have come out in the trenches in particular. You think about the best recruits. I think the highest rated commit to Oregon from Oregon of all time is Thomas Tyner, and he was a running back. You just, for whatever reason, don't find a lot of offensive or defensive linemen that come from the great state of Oregon. So, other finalists for his services were Ohio State, Ole Miss, and then Arizona and Arizona State, because he was an Arizona guy, or at least they were in the fold there. It's just a strange collection of teams there. But for Oregon to be able to land him and hold on to him for as long as they did, I think speaks to, especially with Tosh Lupoi going down to Cal, speaks to the work that Tony Tuioti has done. I mean, Tosh Lupoi's gotten a lot of credit, and obviously he's Cal's head coach now, but he's deservedly gotten a lot of credit for the way that Oregon's recruited on the defensive side of the ball. I think the unsung hero of Oregon's defensive recruiting is Tony Tuioti. The defensive line has just been fantastic in the high school and portal ranks for the last several years. And a big question for him going into this year with all the guys they lost from a depth standpoint. But the scouting report on him on 24/7 says he could play in the ballpark of 300 pounds. That would make a lot of sense. And it's not hard to see why you'd say that. 285 pounds, kind of a tweener-ish weight. I think Jordan Birch played around 290 pounds. But in 2025, he racked up, unsurprisingly, because Oregon high school football, especially the further you get away from Portland, not a ton of elite talent. He was probably the best player on the field, I would guess. 90% of the games that he played in, maybe 100. That's very possible. I mean, number one overall recruit in the state of Oregon, so he might quite literally have always been the best player there. He racked up 102 tackles this past year playing defensive line. That's crazy. Those are linebacker or safety numbers. And 14 sacks. Big time production. He also dabbled on the offensive side of the ball. We love a little two-way action because, hey, you never know. Remember going into that Peach Bowl against Indiana? Braden Platt, the linebacker. I feel like I don't know who the guy is. It's not Larry King, but it's the old guy with the meme. Some of you are going to know what I'm talking about here. Braden Platt, the running back. Anyway, I don't even know what specifically that's from. I just have seen it on Twitter and it's funny. Some of you will get it. So reach out. If you know what that's from specifically, reach out and let me know. But he ran for 4 touchdowns and caught one, and he played basketball at Willamette High School. So when you watch him on film, guy of that size, you wouldn't think has as much speed and quickness as he does. He's got really good hands. There's a little Amari Washington to him with the way that he uses his agility and his hands to get by guys on the interior of an offensive line. I think a couple things, going back to the caliber of players he's going up against typically, I think he's going to have to learn to play a little bit lower. Feels like sometimes he kind of gets up high, but he's already bigger and stronger than the guy across from him. I think that'll be a pretty easy fix. And my ceiling comparison for him, it is indeed Jordan Birch. Another name I want to throw in here that feels a little bit more likely, who would have had a pretty good sized role. I mean, had a decent role this past year for the Ducks, but transferred out as a part of that defensive line exodus. Ashton Porter is the guy that I see a lot of in Tony Cumberland. And what all three players have in common is Birch was a little bit more of an edge prospect, but Ashton Porter was kind of that defensive end, not a true edge, not a guy that's going to stand up a whole heck of a lot on the end of the defensive line, but has that positional versatility to be big enough to slide inside, but is also quick enough to play at that defensive end spot and go after a tackle to try to get to the quarterback. So I think that what Oregon's defensive line room has is a group of guys that really is, I'll throw up the graphic here on YouTube in this 2026 haul. Plenty of talented newcomers that are coming into the fold. And Anthony Jones, by the way, not Tank Jones, Anthony Jones, I think got bumped up to 4-star status, or that might just be in 24/7's rankings. But it's a talented group. It's a talented group, and I think it's a well-balanced group as well. And I think Tank Jones is the most likely of the group to play this year, both positionally and just pure talent-wise. But overall, yeah, I think Tony Cumberland absolutely will have a chance because on the defensive line, you've got the 4 starters returning: Mateo, Tatum, Bear, and Amari Washington, whose fan club I continue to chair for another season, along with Jeremiah McLellan's. But after that, DeAndre Robinson from North Carolina or Jerome Simmons from Louisiana Monroe or Derek Brown coming over. Like, there are bodies. The staff has done a good job of finding guys that, meet the physical profile required to play on the interior of Oregon's defensive line. But is it out of the realm of possibility that Cumberland could see a role? No, I don't think so. Another guy he kind of reminds me of, and again, this is good because this is someone who I think you're going to hear plenty of talk about being a potential breakout candidate. I think he reminds me a little bit of Matthew Johnson, who played towards the end of last season on Oregon's defensive line rotation. And again, coming out of high school, played a little on the edge, little on the interior. He's not, big and bulky, so he can do both, but he's maybe not, big enough to be a nose guard, but he's kind of that tweener size. Like, I think in 2026, my SSA on him playing in any sort of meaningful capacity is at a 4. I think there's an opportunity. There's just a lot of talent and a decent amount of depth after the transfer portal haul that they've brought into that room. But in the future, I'm putting it as 6. If he sticks around with the Ducks, I think at least by his sophomore year, when you'll have a lot of guys that have left that room and gone on to the NFL, and that he'll have had, an entire year to be in a college weight room and get acclimated to the game and whatnot. I think in the future, he's got the traits to be a starter. So I think his starting potential on the good old SSA scale is sitting solidly at a 6. I expect him to be a guy, assuming he sticks around, because I think he's got plenty of talent. So, okay. Just collecting my thoughts. I haven't expressed that many on the guy I'm discussing to wrap today's show. First, this episode brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that's a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. They help you reach people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that really says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data, worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed-sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That is a job for Indeed-sponsored jobs. And it is time, once again, for the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, flavors are ready, and bum 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 bum, ba-da-bum bum bum. With the first pick in the 5-Hour Energy Flavor Draft, I, Spencer McLaughlin, am taking Strawberry Watermelon from Elite Flavors University. That is the number 1 player on my big board. The Andrew Luck, the Trevor Lawrence of big board prospects here. If you're into the sweet side of things, maybe you go for Confetti Craze or Cotton Candy. There are a bunch of flavors to explore. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-Hour Energy shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Check them out at 5hourenergy.com. All right, here is an outside the box, we'll say, SSA to wrap today's show, and then on a Friday we'll close with a bit of trivia as well. SSA, Dink Riggs will be Oregon's second leading rusher in 2026. Former 3-star recruit, entering his 3rd year in Eugene, I'll be honest, I am a little surprised that he's still around given the running back depth that Oregon has. In his 2 years, he has totaled 28 carries for 168 yards and a touchdown. And almost all, we might have seen more of him in the Peach Bowl, but he was injured. Don't think it's expected to be something serious that could threaten his ability to play in a meaningful way in the future. But it does make me wonder. What Brian Windhorst style, throw out the fingers here. Now, why would he do that? He's a talented guy. You know, in the few carries that we've seen from him, he's got a little Bucky Irving shiftiness to him. I don't think he's got a trait other than that that's exceptional. You know, size, solid, little bit smaller, speed, good, but not exactly D'Air Hill. Power, capable, but he's not Jordan Davison. I think he's kind of a Noah Whittington light of sorts. But when you take a look at this running back room and the guys that they have, don't forget, they brought over Simeon Price from Colorado, who's going into his 6th season. I don't think Simeon Price is anything special. I don't think he is a scrub. I think he's capable, probably going to have, you know, a Jay Harris type role, maybe a little bit bigger. There is a real opportunity, and that's what makes this running back room kind of fun. The number 3 running back position, which has been a legitimate part of Oregon's offense last couple of years. I'd say it was Jaden Lamar when healthy a season ago, Jordan James in 2022, and would have been in 23, but then a guy got hurt. Dink Riggs is stuck around for some reason. Maybe he feels like this is finally the year where he is a meaningful part of Oregon's running back room. And the exciting part about this group and what Rashad Samples has done, it's all young. I mean, Riggs is the second oldest guy. He's going into his redshirt sophomore season. So the way that this SSA would come true, where he's the second leading rusher, 2 things have to happen. One of which would be positive and one of which would be negative. First, he has to beat out Simeon Price, a 6th year, and then the 2 true freshmen, Tredarian Ball and Brandon Smith, for the RB3 slot. That's what has to happen first. Now, that's pretty feasible. I can totally see that happening. What then would have to happen is either Jordan Davison or D'Air Hill suffers a season-ending injury. And I don't know if you were thinking about that when you sent the SSA in, but I think that's the only way it comes about. I don't know how Dink Riggs in one offseason surpasses 2 guys he was behind last year in Jordan Davison and D'Air Hill. I really can't see that. So, I mean, with the feasibility of him being RB3, injuries happen, as we saw in the running back room. I'll stash this at a 3.5. I maybe it even needs to be higher than that. Maybe they brought in Simeon Price for super depth, or maybe they brought him in to be RB3. I don't know. Kind of interested in that. I think we all agree, though, Davison and Hill are 1A, 1B. And everyone else is going for that next spot. But I wouldn't sleep on those true freshmen either. Because Tredarian Ball and Brandon Smith, I've talked about Smith already in my 2026 class breakdowns, but have not gotten to Tredarian Ball yet. And he might have my favorite tape of anybody in the class, regardless of position. So I like that one, though. That was a good SSA, thinking outside the box. Let's wrap with this trivia question. This is a good one. This is a really, really good one. It's going to require some thinking. Got to put my thinking cap on. Trivia. There are only 3 players who caught passes in 2024 who will be on the roster in 2026. Who are they? Okay. Caught passes. Evan Stewart is obviously one. As I go through the receiver room, Jeremiah McLaughlin caught a pass in 2024. He redshirted, but he played in 4 games. I'm pretty sure he had at least 1 reception. So he's number 2. It can't. Did Dink Riggs catch a pass? Could this have been the most wonderfully coincidental third segment and trivia together? I didn't even think about that. Did he catch a pass? When would he have caught a pass? Too bad I didn't look at that when I was doing my prep on the segment. That would have been helpful. Okay. That might have to end up being my answer, though. Because I know it can't be any of the sophomores, right? It can't be D.R. Hill or Jordan Davison. It can't be any of the freshmen. Duh. Can't be Simeon Price. He wasn't there. In the tight end room, Jamari Johnson was not there. Andrew Olesh, Kendra Harrison was not there. AJ Pugliano didn't catch a pass. Oh my gosh. I swear I'm realizing this in real time. Who else could it be? Is there an injury I'm not thinking of? Who else could it possibly be? I mean, that's basically all. I mean, who caught a pass in 2024? Trayshawn Holden and Justice Lowe and Tez Johnson and Terrence Ferguson and Kenyon Sadiq and Pat Herbert. Kyler Casper caught one, but he's obviously at BYU now. Saw a video of him catching a deep ball down the sideline. Get excited, BYU fans. That's kind of how it goes. That was unnecessarily mean in a way. I hope he succeeds. But, Roger Saliapaga, also at BYU, not on the roster. I don't know if he caught a pass that year. Wait. Hold on. I'm trying to think in my head. I think it was. Was it Janoris Wilson? Gosh, it might have been on one of those tight end touchdowns. They had, he had one this past year against Wisconsin. Bo Nix, I think, threw him, or was it Gabriel that threw it to him? Against Maryland. Those are the 3 guys. I tell you what, I'm glad I didn't jump to Dink Riggs. And if it is Dink Riggs, well, then maybe I should retire. Okay, final answer. Jeremiah McLaughlin. I'm just going to reread the question, make sure I'm getting it right. There are only 3 players who caught passes in 2024 who will be on the roster in 2026. Who are they? Yeah. Okay. Final answer. Jeremiah McLaughlin, Evan Stewart, and Janoris Wilson. That might be right. If that's right, that'd be my favorite correct response of all time. So hopefully that's how we end the week. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.